Though, is that necessary?
We're not asking them to take action on anything, right?
Just studying.
So no recording needed?
Okay. Well, hi. We ready? On?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our board budget study session. All meetings of the Board of Education are open to members of the public unless publicly noticed as a confidential closed session as allowed by the law. Ed Code Section 35147. Members of the public may address the board as outlined in the public comment section of the agenda. The audio of all meetings is recorded, and a member of the public may be held liable for any slanderous or otherwise defamatory statements. In consideration of the board and members of the audience, please turn off or silence your cell phones while in the boardroom. The San Marino Unified School District encourages those with disabilities to participate fully in the public meeting process. If you need a disability-related modification or accommodation, including auxiliary aids or services to participate in the public meeting, contact the assistant to the superintendent at J. De La Torre at SMUSD US or 626-299-7000, extension 1310. At least 48 hours before the scheduled board meeting so that we may make every reasonable effort to accommodate you. Government Code 54953.2 and Americans with Disabilities Acts of 1990, 202, 42, USC 12132. Documents will provided to a majority of the Board of Education regarding an open session item on this agenda will be made available for public inspection in the district office located at 1665 West Drive, San Marino, during normal business hours. In addition, such writings and documents may be viewed at the district's website at www.smusd.us. Number 1, open session for closed session, 5 p.m. And the meeting is called to order at 5:03.
Thank you.
Call to order. I'd like to do a roll call. Me. Mrs. Shelley Ryan.
Me.
Present. Mrs. Gill, present. Mr. Chang, Mr. Sung, and Ms. Lamb are not currently present, but may come later in the meeting. Student Board Member Burke has already completed his last meeting, I believe, right? There is an approval of agenda required,
So moved.
and seconded. We're not voting on anything.
Myself.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay,
You can second.
I did.
Okay, then we're good.
All in favor? Mrs. Ryan, roll call, vote,
Aye.
and I agree as well. Okay. Public comment. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323 to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have 3 options to submit public comments. 1, through an online form. Did we have any submissions through online form?
We had no submissions today.
Thank you.
And 2, request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. Mr. Huang, please pause the meeting for 1 minute to collect public comments.
Is there anyone
If
in
there's
there?
anyone on Zoom.
There is
Thank you.
members on Zoom. So the 1 minute starts now. Communications from the audience regarding matters on the agenda only. Please provide your comments now. If you'd like to request to speak, please press the raise hand icon to make a request. If you're dialing in from home, please dial *9 to make a request, or please submit a public comment card. There is 30 seconds left.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, he sent us a text.
Okay,
He's on his way.
good.
Oh, yeah, he just is pulling.
There are no attendees wishing to speak.
Wonderful. Okay, number 3, request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Do we have any submissions via the public comment card?
Not at this time.
Wonderful. Item 4, Board Budget Study Session. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Choi to facilitate a special budget board study session with the Board of Education.
All right, thank you, President Gill. It's my pleasure to guide this study session on the budget. As you know, school finance is one of those areas where it gets quite complex. It can be very complex because of the ever-changing landscape of education in the state of California. And being in California, a lot of our budget depends on the state economy. For today, what I'd like to do is to kind of walk us through what education funding is like in California, how we got to where we are, and then give some updates from the latest governor's May revise. And then finally conclude the study session with some hot topics in regards to how we are developing the budget for the upcoming 2026-27 school year. I also like to mention joining us today is our Director of Accounting, Ms. Susanna Barba, who is joining us today. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive right into public education funding. As you know, the Board of Education, one of the key roles in establishing an effective and efficient structure for a school district is really establishing budget priorities and adopting the budget. Those are one of your key responsibilities as a board member. Secondly, in addition to adopting the budget, one of your key roles is to ensure accountability to the public, which is really monitoring and adjusting district finances as needed. So the budget cycle is a cyclical process. The school budget is very much in line with the state's budget process. Starting in January, the governor does propose his budget for the upcoming year. And it isn't until mid-May, or May 14th to be specific, that the governor then updates that proposal and provides a May revise. And then it is up and through June 15th where the legislature then finally passes or adopts the budget in order to start effectively July 1st. Now, school budgets, especially public school budgets, are dependent on this budget cycle. So when the state of California passes their budget, the school districts follow the state budget in the sense that timing-wise, it's starting also July 1st. And then throughout the year, there are interim updates. So the first 3 months go by and the district provides a snapshot, which is called the first interim. And then another 3 months go by and we provide a second interim. And then finally, as the year wraps up at the end of the year on June 30th, the district will then provide a financial report called the unaudited actuals, which gives you like a rear view mirror of what's happening, what has happened with the school's budget. So as you know, you may be familiar with these terms on whether a budget is determined to be negative, qualified, or positive. So whenever we provide financial reports, we are recommending to the board the state of the budget, not just for the current year, but the next 2 years out as well. And of course, the evolution of California public school funding has definitely evolved over the years. What initially started as mostly locally funded schools over 100 years ago has really evolved into a funding formula structure, which is really more focused on equity. And then with the introduction of Prop 13 in 1978, really having a negative impact on school funding, the school, in fact, the state has passed Prop 98 shortly after Prop 13 to ensure that there is a minimum funding guarantee for public schools. And then fast forward 15 years later, we are now in the era of the local control funding formula, which is still focused on equity, but it's more formulaic in the sense that schools are looking at serving high-need students through supplemental and concentration funding. So it's becoming definitely a lot more formulaic in that sense. When we zoom out and take a look at California's overall state budget, K-12 education has a big slice of that pie. For many years, K-12 education has had the biggest piece of that pie. But in the last 2 years, it has dropped to second place in the sense that Health and Human Services now has the biggest piece of that pie. And K-12 education has traditionally represented about 40% of the state's budget. And of course, with the LCFF, public school districts are funded 2 ways, either through LCFF or through basic aid. And for communities that have very high property values, some of these districts may generate sufficient property taxes to fully fund above and beyond what the state considers a minimum level. And that is often mistaken here in San Marino. A lot of folks believe that because of the high property values in San Marino, that San Marino is a basic aid district, when in fact it is not. San Marino Unified is an LCFF district. Unfortunately, homes in San Marino Unified do not generate sufficient property taxes to meet that state guaranteed minimum level. As you can see on the chart here, represented with the bucket on the left, with San Marino Unified, property taxes represent about $20 million of our budget. That's about half of what's needed in order to meet that state minimum level. The district does in fact receive a state aid to meet that revenue limit. And the local control funding formula is indeed a formula. It takes a look at the number of students and looks at what grade levels they're at. And the way it's calculated is based on number of students, you have a base grant, which is a certain dollar amount per student. And depending on the grade levels, whether it's TK through 3, 4 through 6, 9 through 12, will determine a unique base grant level. Now, on top of that, certain grade levels have a add-on. So for TK through 3 and 9 through 12, school districts will receive an additional add-on. Now, what's also unique about the LCFF is the opportunity to earn some supplemental or concentration grant money. Here in San Marino Unified, 20% of our students are considered high-need students, and we do receive some supplemental grant funding. And these additional funds are for low-income, foster youth, English learners. So San Marino Unified does receive a little bit of supplemental grant money. Unfortunately, our district does not receive any concentration money. Concentration grant funds are available to those districts that have a 55% or more high-need student population. And at San Marino, we are close to about 20% of our population having that high-need percentage. And of course, the big takeaway is not only is enrollment important, but attendance is also very important. So part of the formula is calculating the actual number of days that students are actually in school. And so enrollment isn't enough. We want to make sure that our kiddos are in school. And of course, one of the big talking points that we want to ensure that our community is educated about is the fact that San Marino Unified is one of the lowest funded school districts in the state of California. As you can see on the chart here, when we take a look at San Marino Unified, we receive about $13,000 per student from the state. In comparison to a lot of these districts that we often compare ourselves with, when you take a look at the top 3, those are basic aid districts. They receive 3 times the amount that we receive in terms of state and federal funds. So San Marino Unified is indeed one of the lowest funded public school districts in California. When we take a look at our overall revenues, LCFF is still significant, right? It represents 65% of our revenues. 30% of our revenues are from local sources, including our parcel taxes, our San Marino Schools Foundation, as well as our PTAs that contribute towards that. This slide should look familiar. It's from our second interim. Every interim report, we always provide a comparison of the last financial report so that you can take a look at what's changed. And as you can see here, we are funded by the ADA. So despite having 3,272 students enrolled, we are earning 3,192.37 for ADA. And what's also interesting here is the unduplicated count, which you see most currently at 723. That unduplicated count is the number of high-need students in our district. And it's called unduplicated count because for every student that is high need, you can't count that student more than once, in the sense that if the student is an English learner and also is a low-income student, they only count once. So that's why they're called unduplicated count. And of course, our local revenues with Schools Foundation and parcel tax revenues, those are reflected here in terms of our assumptions for revenues. Now, on the expenditure side, 75% of our budget goes towards people. This includes salaries and health and welfare benefits. This is not unique to San Marino. Most public school districts do spend a majority of their expenditures on people. And again, this is another snapshot of that second interim expenditures report. Nothing surprising here, but these are the numbers behind that chart. Now, a common question I get is, how much do we spend on special education? And when it comes to special education, we want to take a look at how much of our budget is actually spent on special education. And when we compare ourselves, San Marino Unified, with all the other districts in Los Angeles County, you can see that San Marino Unified is on the far right side of this chart, showing that we spend about 20% of our budget on special education, which is in many regards very well managed. What you want to avoid is spending too much on special education, in the sense that there is something called a maintenance of effort factor that requires school districts to spend more each and every year. You can't spend less. So that's one of the key reasons why we call managing special education expenditures a full-time task, is that a lot of time, and I'm speaking on behalf of Susanna Barber here, is that a lot of time is spent coding expenditures to ensure that we don't spend more than what we have to, in the sense of coding these expenditures. So I think the district is doing a very good job of managing special education
Dr.
expenses.
Choi, can you
Yes.
go back to last two? They have a special education figure, yeah.
Yeah, so the special education figure that you see on there is the district's contribution towards special education. So with special education, the district simply does not receive enough money from the state or even from the federal level designed specifically for special education, that the district has to pull from its general fund in order to contribute towards these expenditures.
Is that this number including for settlement amount? Sometimes we have a settlement. Including or not including?
It depends. Generally, if it's a special education expenditure, it would be.
So 4.9 is about 20%.
It's about 20%. That is the, I believe that's the overall special education expenditure, right?
Those revenue.
Oh, revenues. That's revenues coming from our SELPA, actually.
Oh,
Right. Yeah, so our SELPA, so the way that school districts are funded with special education funding is that it comes from the state, it goes through the SELPA, which is the local agency representing all the different districts that utilize special education services.
so this is revenue, so how much is the expense?
So we would have to look at our budget to get the detailed number, but in terms of our overall expenditures, it's about 20% of our expenditures.
Just to reiterate, we're spending about 20% of our total budget on special education services.
Which is 20% of our student population. So
It's
Right.
less than- Special ed
just said it.
students is less than 20%.
Yeah, the number of students, correct. Yeah, I was talking about funding. The funding represents about 20% of our expenditure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's about 276
Yeah.
students.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because later on in the presentation, I'll talk about some of the updates in regards to special education funding. We've received some very positive news from the state in regards to that. I also want to talk,
Doesn't catch up with all the years that we did not.
it still
get.
does not, very,
Absolutely.
very observant.
So I
I'll
would
tell you right.
make sure you say that.
Yes, yes. In terms of inter-district permits, 30% of our students are on inter-district permits in San Marino Unified. And many of these students are the children of our teachers, our staff, and city employees as well. And this is significant. It's significant in the sense that it produces and generates $14 million in revenues for our school district. And this $14 million is significant in the sense that it represents 40% of our non-fixed expenditures. So those non-fixed expenditures, meaning utility bills, internet access, various operating costs, just to keep the lights on and the classrooms open. Those 30% of students bring in more than enough revenue to cover 40% of those expenditures. So these revenues are critical to our district. What's also important that's not so much noted on this slide is the fact that interdistricts also provide us the opportunity to provide a very comprehensive educational program at our district. Without interdistrict students, we simply don't have enough students to really provide that full breadth of programs and services that we offer. And of course, this slide, I really ought to frame this in my office because this is something that we are extremely proud of, which is a snapshot of how we've performed in terms of our enrollment in ADA over the last 15 years. You'll see going back to 2010 through 2021, there was a slight drop in the number of students enrolled in our school district. Now, what you see here is very unique to San Marino Unified, which is starting in 2023, it begins to go back up. The majority of districts in the state of California, including especially in Los Angeles County, will not see that increase, will not see that uptick starting in 2023. Most districts continue to decline. We are very fortunate and very proud of the fact that we do have restored the number of students that are enrolled in our school district.
So let me ask that question. So it seems like in 2010, we have the enrollment 3,200. But right now we have a 3,000. Still, we are a little bit lower than at the time of.
That is correct. That is correct. We still have a little, we're not fully restored back to the same.
At 3,200 right now.
So this is 2025
For 26.
data going back from 24 to 25, right? So once we have the 25, 26 data, you'll see that enrollment continue to go up.
You could go back to the
Let's
slide
share-
to show.
Yeah, share what it is today.
There.
3,272 students.
So that means that we are going back to the full capacity.
We're headed toward full
Full
capacity.
capacity, okay.
Yeah,
Good.
What is that number exactly?
3,300 is,
Probably 3,300 is probably max.
3,300, well, we were over that actually one year, you probably.
I do recall, and in fact, I think before 2010, at some time, we were in the 3,300s.
Also, if we pass using the measure M, if we building the classroom more, does it mean that our capacity is actually gonna go up too?
Say that again, repeat that.
So since we passing the measure M already and we building
Yeah.
more classroom, I don't know if we are building more classroom. Does it mean that we're gonna have a bigger capacity so we can contain 3,600? Not,
Those buildings was really to cater to our existing needs.
I see.
We now have to educate transitional kindergarten students.
uh-huh.
And 3- and 4-year-olds are developmentally in a different space and place than our kindergarten students. And so they need classrooms that meet their needs and have restroom access and such. And so we have designed some of the classroom spaces with that in mind that we're building at the elementary schools. In addition to that, we talked about having food service at Valentine, which Valentine has not had in the past. And at the high school, we're really looking at creating a career technical education wing that is conducive to our medical arts program, robotics, and any other career technical education program that we may want to bring to San Marino High School students in the future.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily that we're creating more classrooms to add more kids. That's not really what we're doing at all.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm just wondering, are we gonna have a little bit bigger capacity?
We
So,
will.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest,
Spaces.
Yeah.
more comfortably.
the key difference here is that in 2010, we didn't serve TK students,
Yeah,
but now we do.
now we do.
So as part of the Measure M program, it is one part of the design that we do provide facilities appropriate for TK students that we didn't have
And how
need to
many
before.
TKs are there? Paid children. About.
We have 4 sections of Valentine, 5 or 7 sections with about 20 kids per class. So we were saying 140.
Under 40.
By the way, is that school district able to get those census either from county or from the city for to know the how many each age? Because I think for the board song trying to say what is our maximum capacity. So we always also need to know each age, the number, and also we also need to know traditionally how many they go to the private school.
Yeah,
So, so then with those data, then we can figure out is that we are able, and also I think we also don't want to break to the threshold, continue to accept the inter-district. Yeah, we probably with all the consensus, then a cap not to over. So for those factors, yeah, together.
Yeah, determining the number of students in the community, I think Educational Services does a great job with the enrollment and registration to try to track and project the number of students that are within the San Marino Unified community. I know in past years, Dr. Richter's team has reached out to even preschools in the area just to gauge and see. And we've done a really good job in terms of gathering that information as soon as possible. A lot of that has now transitioned to online where families can pre-register and enroll their students as early as possible so that we can have the data sooner rather than later.
So Mr. Chang, I've done that research with the census data, and I can tell you with 100% confidence that we do not have enough school-age children residing within the San Marino district boundaries to get to the 3,200 kids that we need in order to provide the comprehensive programs and services that we currently do. So I can get you the detailed information. I don't have it with me today because I wasn't prepared to speak on that. But I know for a fact that we just don't have the kids in San Marino in order to fill up our schools and to be able to continue to provide services. We would have to consider consolidation of our schools if we were to eliminate the inter-district students from the equation. In addition to that, the laws are such that even when we deny inter-district permits, the County Office of Education oftentimes overrules us through the appeals process, and then we end up taking those students anyway. And we have, remember, we have our legacy permit, which is grandparents in the community who have lived in San Marino for 10 years or more are able to enroll their grandchildren. That is a type of interdistrict. Bless you. Bless you. Can we see the number of grandparent residents enrolling their grandchildren increasing year over year? So that also increases the percentage of interdistrict kids that are actually legacy students in our district. But I'm happy to provide you with that information if you would like to see it.
Well, just that you know, for my profession, I keep watching, you know, for last 3 years. So in this neighborhood, the acute care hospital OB department, they closed. From the, you know, the vertical here, you know, USC hospital, they closed OB. So that area, the OB doctor, I don't know how they can survive. Then they probably need to relocate. And then the Montreal Park, the 2 hospitals, they close OB. No, 1 hospital closed OB. St. Gabriel Valley Medical Center closed OB.
Yeah,
El Monte, they closed.
Yeah, birth rates, not just in San Marino, but throughout California, is of concern. I think nationally, it is of concern. We do need folks to have more babies in order. So, but
And our public information officer is helping with that problem because she is due in September.
Thank you.
So thank you. Doing her part.
so if I may, I'd like to highlight some of the May revisions.
Everything. Just like right.
So the governor came out with his May revision on May 14th, which in my opinion is some very positive news for TK through 12 education. And I'll start with just looking at a macro level, when we take a look at how important the economy is and how its relationship is to TK through 12 public education, we often have to look at economic statistics, and we look at the GDP, which is the United States GDP, right? And you can see that year over year since 2022, there has been consistent growth. And a lot of this growth is really fueled by AI. And I think initially when that observation was made, a lot of folks just assumed that, oh, it's probably tech companies and AI companies that is really just fueling that growth. And what UCLA forecast and also pointed out was that it turns out it's not just AI companies. It's actually traditional companies as well in various industries that are investing in AI. So it's not just the AI companies themselves. They're investing. The amount of dollars that are being invested in AI is really driving the growth of the GDP. And when we zoom in a little bit more in terms of what's happening in California, that growth is also being experienced in California. However, when we look at how we assess the economy in California, that has shifted a little bit. Traditionally, when we look at California's economy, we have focused on the unemployment rate or even US job openings in relation and comparison to California. And interestingly enough, economists are calling this California's new bifurcated economy. And it doesn't seem to jive with what we used to use before, which was if the unemployment rate was low and job openings were high, you would experience growth. What we're seeing is that unemployment in California is higher than the US unemployment rate. And at the same time, the number of jobs in California relatively is lower in percentage-wise when compared to the nation. But yet at the same time, there is significant growth in terms of revenues for the state. So that's why economists are calling this a bifurcated economy. It doesn't really make sense when we look at it through just unemployment and job openings. So when we zoom in on the big three taxes here in California, these are the major revenue drivers that produce revenues for the state of California and ultimately will affect public schools. You can see in this chart here that the majority of the revenues are still coming from personal income tax. And what's hopeful here and optimistic is that when we look at the current year, 25-26, there was significant revenue growth coming from these personal income taxes. Even when we compare back to January, when the governor first proposed his budget. In fact, if we zoom in, back in comparing a year ago, that growth in personal income tax was about $1.1 billion in the previous year. But this current year, just between January and May, it's a $9 billion increase in personal income tax. That is significant. And of course, economists are somewhat skeptical. They don't know whether or not this is sustainable in future years out, but they're still projecting growth. So this is very unique, and I think it sets the foundation for what we're going to hear about some of the key changes happening in the May revise. And as you heard with Prop 98 providing a minimum level of funding for public schools, what's interesting is at the same time, enrollment across the state has declined. You'll see that there's a 9.3% decrease in enrollment in the state of California, but yet the Proposition 98 per student funding has increased 161%. Now, on this chart here, it says Prop 98 per student funding is at $22,000. We don't see that. We don't see that here in San Marino. As I mentioned earlier, we're closer to about 13,000. But still, at the same time, Prop 98 has delivered significant additional funding per student across the state over the last several years. And of course, I have to bring this up because this is a major concern for many school districts, if not all public school districts in the state of California. Is this whole idea of settling up. It was initially introduced by the governor a couple years ago. He first called it a maneuver, and then they called it a maneuver number 2. And then now it's more appropriately called a settle up. But there's really 2 ways that schools can be under-appropriated, meaning that state law says school districts receive this amount of money. And in the past, the governor and the state could suspend Prop 98. That was the legal way of the state coming in and saying, well, we can't afford to pay this much, so we're going to suspend Prop 98. And by suspending it, there are a couple of things that you have to do in order for the suspension to happen. One is, even if the Prop 98 level of funding is suspended, schools would still qualify for COLA, for example, for that suspended amount. Secondly, the Constitution would then determine how that amount would ultimately be repaid to the districts. And then finally, it does require 2/3 of the legislature to approve that suspension. Well, the governor, about 2 years ago, came up with a very creative approach and not suspending it, but rather using the settle-up approach, which is very concerning for school districts because, one, it does under-appropriate the amount of money that the state schools are constitutionally guaranteed, but there's no COLA. So with a settle-up, there's no COLA adjustment. Also, the state constitution then doesn't determine how it's repaid. It's determined by the director of finance. And then finally, it doesn't even require a 2/3 vote. It requires a simple majority vote by the legislature. So these are very significant concerns. And what this ultimately means for the 25-26 school year is the governor is proposing a $3.9 billion settle-up. That means an under appropriation. Schools are supposed to be constitutionally provided this amount of money. I guess there is a silver lining to this, which is originally in January, the governor proposed withholding $5.6 billion. But as of May, the governor has backed off a little bit and said, we'll just withhold 3.9. Still significant in the sense that for districts, that represents $654 per ADA. In our district, that's $2 million. $2 million additional dollars that we should have received, but is no longer going to receive because of this settle-up withholding. Now, one piece of good news for the state is that the governor has replenished the reserve, the public school system stabilization account. This is the rainy day fund for Prop 98. And what this ultimately means is that for local reserve caps, that will be back in place. So when Prop 98 was suspended, school districts no longer had that local reserve cap of 10%. And a lot of districts, especially with COVID money, did build up its reserves. But with the rainy day fund being replenished, that is something that we'll be talking a little bit more about, which is how we will address that when the local reserve cap of 10% will be back into play. So I think the big piece of good news is the COLA. So as you may know, public school districts really have only a few ways where cost of living adjustments are made, and that's typically dependent on the COLA. In January, when the budget was enacted, we estimated that the COLA would be at 3.02%. When the governor then provided his budget proposal in January, it was estimated at 2.41, a little bit lower than what we had budgeted. And then the May revise comes out and the statutory COLA is set at 2.87. What came as a surprise, I think especially for us, was the fact that the governor is not only proposing that the state fully fund the statutory COLA of 2.87%, but also that the state is providing an additional COLA of 1.44%. And they're calling this the additional LCFF investment, making a super COLA of now 4.31%. This is huge news for public school districts because, again, we had budgeted it at 3.02 and then looked at it possibly going down. And now we are very fortunate to have this super COLA of 4.31%. This is exclusive to TK through 12 public school districts. It is not something that is being provided to other state departments. So this is huge news for public school districts in California. Next is, and this is big news, we talked a little bit about special education funds. The governor is proposing an additional increase, and this is a historic additional increase to special education funding. In fact, a 43% increase to the base rate of what schools receive in terms of ADA for special education funding. In our district, this is significant. This is an additional $1 million in funding that will ultimately help us offset our special education contribution. And this is very welcome news for our district.
So does it mean that we're getting the special education, we get the funding based on the ADA, not on the special education, but ADA of everybody?
So the way that is proposed is that's how it is being calculated. And as Board Shelley Ryan mentioned, special education costs is underfunded. The state and the federal levels do not provide sufficient funding. So, every year when you look at our budget, there is a special line item in there and it says special education contribution. And what the district has to do is, after taking the funds available from the SALPA and from the state, the district has to make an additional contribution to pay to fund special education. What this will now do is that it increases the base rate. I believe it was around $900, a little below $900 for the 25-26 school year. In 26-27, it is proposed that base rate be increased 43%. So this is significant.
Base rate of the special education student?
No, for all students.
All students?
All
Okay.
students, yes.
To funding for the special
To
education?
pay towards
Okay,
special
I got it,
education,
I got it.
yes. And of course, Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. This was a very significant source of one-time funds available to public school districts, especially after the pandemic. The governor is proposing to fully restore the remaining dollar amounts that were committed towards this program. And what that translates to us is 228 additional dollars per ADA for our school district, comes out to be a little bit over $600,000 in additional one-time funds that the district can spend on the same priorities. It's not something that you can spend on everything or anything. It's still very much in line with the priorities of the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, but this is very welcome news for us as well. And of course, Mandate Block Grant is a grant that is provided to public school districts to meet the requirements of state mandates. There's a slight bump in this as well, in addition to the statutory COLA. And some of the mandate block grant requirements vary. Every year in the first state packet, we provide a document that kind of summarizes all of the new laws that come into play for the school year. And then the state comes in and says, well, here's a chunk of money. It's called the mandate block grant. You figure out how to pay for it. So this is very welcomed as well for us to be able to have this additional money to pay and meet those requirements. And another piece of big news, I think for all school districts, is this student support and professional development discretionary block grant. It is a long one. So last year, the district received about $900,000. It was one-time funds. The district has 3 years to spend that on state priorities. Although it is a fully discretionary grant, that means districts can spend it however they want. The priorities of that grant is to spend on professional development, dual enrollment, career pathways, and to address rising costs. The governor on May 14th came out and proposed that he's going to provide another round of this discretionary block grant, and it's significant. At $936.98 per ADA, that translates to about $2.8 million for our school district. Now, something to caution, it's the big yellow part of the chart here, is that it hasn't passed legislature yet, and there is some talk about the potential of legislature coming out and saying that, well, we're not gonna distribute it just based on the ADA. We may take your UPP or supplemental or concentration grant formula into consideration when we distribute this. So that would negatively impact us in that regard. Or two, restricting on how some of these funds could be used. So right now, it is fully discretionary, meaning districts can spend it how they choose. But we'll see how the legislature turns out after June 15th in terms of providing any specific requirements to use these funds. And this chart is valuable in the sense that not only is it visual, it provides a nice comparison of the revenue growth in comparison to expenditure costs. So it's nice in the sense that it also provides a multi-year view. So if we look at the 2026-27, you'll see that on the left, let's see, I think I could probably point a little thing. There we go. I don't know if you can see it. But this particular chart is nice in the sense that it is outpacing the expenditures, right? So that is good news. We do want to see revenues outpacing expenditures, right? It reflects the base growth. In terms of expenditures, it does show inflation being a factor, step in column. And one of the major things I want to point out is that special education contribution coming down from the previous year. So that white box there from the previous year is significantly bigger than what is projected in 26-27. What's also new, and I think our PIO would appreciate this, is the PPDL, is the Paid Pregnancy Disability Leave Program. It is a new program exclusive to TK through 12 education. It is provided to all employees 14 weeks of paid leave. And that's huge news in the sense that should employees need this, it's available to them. And it's a priority of the state to offer this to public school employees. So that is very welcome news. And in this chart, you'll see that that is on the cost expenditure side.
Can you explain why there's such a reduction, but then it just goes right back up to like what it was before?
So the main driver of that is really special education contribution, is that we still don't know if it's enough, right? Even with the additional 43% increase to special education, what we don't know is whether or not that's still going to be enough to outpace revenues. So it'll still continue to be underfunded in the sense, even with the 43% increase, it's not enough to cover it all.
So it's kind of like a forecasting, right?
It is.
So, yeah.
It is forecast, yeah. And one thing I want to reiterate is that School Services of California is asking school districts, for that matter, to consider this special education contribution more as an investment. And, when I heard that, we were at the workshop and we kind of looked at each other and it's like, we're already doing that. We've implemented MTSS. We've implemented so many different programs really designed to make, experiences more inclusive. So I think it's a right move in the direction for the state of California. But I'm also proud to say that in our district, we've implemented a lot of things in the right direction already. So this is a huge boon for us to be able to leverage some of these dollars. So all in all, in terms of budget development, we will take into the statutory and the additional LCFF investment COLAs. We are being very cautious about the discretionary block grant. And of course, we are, in terms of risk level, we are anticipating that LREBG, as well as the special education base rate, into our budget planning for the new year. One thing I do want to mention, because this was a finding in our 24-25 audit, is the CEA requirement. This is a century-old law where school districts are mandated to spend 55% of their budget, or expenditures for that matter, on certificated salaries. And in 24-25, the district was short, I believe, less than 0.5%. So many, and I guess the point of showing the slide is that we are not the only ones. In fact, last year, 58% of districts failed to meet this requirement. So one of the key takeaways from the workshop we attended was that school services provided some tips in terms of how we really ought to code and take a look at how our expenditures are classified when it comes to categorizing certificated expenditures in terms of addressing this requirement. And again, we are not the only ones. We're seeing this continue to grow and escalate as we proceed. And then on the topic of reserve levels, We are not unique in the sense that our reserves are very healthy. Most districts throughout the state of California have experienced significant growth in their reserves since the pandemic. But yet, at the same time, in terms of addressing escalating costs, we are beginning to see those reserves coming down. Looking at the state of California, the average has, you begin to see that decrease from 23-24. And it's not unique, but that is something that is of consideration as districts look to find ways to offset some of those increasing costs. They are looking at their reserves. Good news, the Universal School Meals Program will continue in the new year. It will be fully funded. And another unique program is the Kitchen and Infrastructure Training Grant. In the last 2 years, State of California provided a competitive grant process. And I'm proud to say that our district benefited from that competitive grant process. Our district did apply and receive KIT funds to replace a lot of our kitchen appliances, infrastructure upgrades, copper pipes, things like that. So the good news is that the governor is proposing to continue to fund a similar program, but in the sense that it won't be competitive. It'll actually be distributed to districts, whether that be on an ADA level, we're not sure yet, but we're looking at it being allocated, and we hope to take advantage of these additional funds to also continue to improve our kitchen and infrastructure. And of course, this is the famous dartboard that all districts rely on when it comes to taking a look at what the budget translates into numbers. Some of the key takeaways here is that you'll see the additional COLA on there. Also, what's important to point out is that additional TK add-on, there is statutory COLA applied to that. However, that additional super COLA is not applied to that TK add-on. Another important thing to point out here is when we take a look at our pension liabilities and we look at CalSTRS and CalPERS, we do see that leveling off. Year over year, we've often see that continue to go up, but you can see, especially with CalPERS, it goes at 26.81 this current year, and then it goes down, and then maybe up a little bit, and 27, 28, but then goes back down to 25. So we do see that stabilizing and possibly maybe hitting a ceiling, hopefully. So let's shift into budget development. I do want to mention how we are addressing things like increased costs, cash flow, and our committed balances. So let's start with increased costs. Generally, there has been an increase in our overall costs, and those will be offset with the COLA that we'll be receiving. And of course, another significant increased cost is the cost of employee benefits, health and welfare benefits. When we look specifically at medical benefits, we're looking at approximately a 12% increase in that. So we are leveraging that super COLA to help offset some of those costs. Of course, another major area that we are looking very closely at is the instructional materials and supplies. We are seeing increased costs related to those supplies, and we have made adjustments to our budget to allocate additional funds to our schools. And we are very much looking forward to utilizing some of those discretionary block grant funds to help offset some of those increased costs. And of course, transportation costs. With the changes in the league at the high school level, they are looking at an additional increased cost of approximately 30% when it comes to transportation costs. The cost
What does that mean in dollars?
So we spend approximately $150,000 just for athletic transportation. No, athletic and VAPA transportation costs. And when you look at a 30% increase, it is a projection. What we don't know yet is, because we haven't even started that league yet, in our conversations with our school sites, especially at the high school level, we've been very fortunate to be brought up to at least knowing that it's going to happen, right? But until it happens, a lot of times when it comes to athletic transportations, we really don't know if certain games will happen. Depends on whether or not they make it to a certain level, right? But based on our projections, based on what we're looking at, we are estimating an additional 30% increase in transportation costs. So we are looking to offset that with a 3-year plan to leverage that discretionary block grant to help offset that.
It's gonna go up because we're gonna go to championship this year.
That would be a positive. That would be a positive. In terms of cash flow, because Prop 98 is being proposed to be under appropriated, we have to take into consideration the potential for deferrals. And it won't be the first time that school districts have experienced deferrals. We have experienced deferrals in the past. We want to ensure that we have sufficient cash flow. We also want to mitigate or avoid borrowing if we don't have to. In past years, our district has borrowed in order to ensure that we make payroll. These have been referred to as TRANS, or Tax and Revenue Anticipation Notes. It gives public school districts the opportunity to borrow from the county office, which utilizes a pool. It's a much better interest rate, if you will, compared to borrowing from a bank. But what we want to do is, because of the reserves that we have, we want to ensure that we have sufficient cash flow so that we don't have to borrow. And of course, looking at our committed balances, we want to ensure that we commit sufficient funds for cash flow.
Does the cash flow account count towards the reserve percentage or no?
So the way that our cash flow account, which is Fund 17.2, would count towards the 10% reserve cap. What we are proposing is taking a look at our committed funds, and committed funds will not count towards that reserve cap. So one of our proposals in the upcoming adopted budget is to ensure that we commit $4 million in the cash flow reserve. Just going back to the cash flow, we currently have about just under $4 million for cash flow. And that represents a little over a month of payroll. So it's important that we have sufficient funds designated for cash flow, especially when deferrals come. And looking at our ending fund balance, this is our ending fund balance, a snapshot as of our most recent second interim financial report. We have an opportunity to work with you, the board, to take a look at what the board would like to commit to its committed funds. And here's what we propose. One is to commit enrollment and revenue stabilization reserve of $2 million. This $2 million committed balance would help offset any potential for declining enrollment. As you saw, many districts in California are experiencing declining enrollment. This would provide us the sufficient buffer. Although we have not experienced a decline in enrollment, at least for the last 2 to 3 years, this would provide us a sufficient reserve to stabilize our budget should there be an effect of declining revenues. Secondly, we are proposing that we commit $6 million towards a fiscal stabilization reserve. And this is pretty much in line with the fact that this district relies on 2 parcel taxes. Both measures R and E provide $6.1 million in ongoing revenues for our district year after year. And this reserve would provide us that cushion, that rainy day fund, if you will, should the parcel taxes be affected. The third committed balance being considered here is the Capital Facilities and Infrastructure Reserve. $5 million to go towards a reserve in the event that, as you know, we have a Measure M bond program. And knowing that many districts, because it takes time to leverage bond dollars and to build buildings and capital facilities, there are significant cost escalation factors to consider. By setting aside $5 million and committed towards capital facilities helps us ensure that there are sufficient funds in the event that we don't have enough Measure M dollars. So that would be the purpose of that committed fund balance. The next 2 are not new in the sense, but they are being recommended for committed balances, which is Instructional Materials and Textbook Reserve, as well as the Program Innovations Reserve. These are balances that were in our budget under assigned balances, but definitely in the sense that when we are looking at committed balances, we want to ensure that we are committing these funds for these purposes because these are priorities for the district should we not have enough money to cover these priorities. And of course, we talked a little bit about cash flow reserve already. So with that, I do want to wrap up with some very positive news, which has to do with ClearGov transparency. As you may recall, back when the board had its board retreat, we talked about the prospect of implementing an online portal that will provide not just budget information, but the opportunity to tell our financial story. And since then, we have worked very closely with ClearGov to not just sync the data and to incorporate our financial data over several years. We now have gone live with our SMUSD.US/transparency portal. Not only does it provide financial information where it allows the user to drill down and take a very close look at our revenues and expenditures, but it also helps tell our financial story. A lot of the things, and I'm thinking being selfish here when I say telling our financial story, I tell the financial story over and over again, and it's always been a dream of mine to be able to have that story be told online. So with this portal, what you'll see is not only does it provide student information and our demographic information about our district, as well as employee information, it also provides information where visitors can drill into the actual revenues and expenditures and actually take a very detailed look at where the money is going and where the money is coming from. And you'll see this in various visual ways. You'll be able to see it as pie and bar charts, and then in this particular example, you see it as a mountain chart here. Furthermore, it's not just 1 year of data. It goes back, this one goes all the way back to 2022. And what's really nice is I want to highlight the dashboards. So we have a very well-developed section called Interesting Facts on the district's budget, as well as a frequently asked questions. And in this section, you'll see that it not only highlights some of the slides and things that I've talked about in our study session today, but it also features some really important facts and key talking points that I think everyone in the San Marino Unified community should be aware of. So it's really an education piece. It talks about very important things like why does the district need donations, right? It talks about where our local support comes from and what it represents for our district and the importance of the parcel taxes and our schools foundation, as well as our PTA contributions. It also addresses a very important question of reserves. What do we do with our reserves? Why are we committing these dollars? And the importance of the fact that these reserves really represent one-time funds. They're not ongoing funds. And also, a very common question, well, didn't we just pass a $200 million bond? Doesn't that address all of our financial concerns? Well, it addresses our financial concerns when it comes to facilities and construction, but it doesn't address all of our concerns, right? So I encourage you and anyone who's listening in and the public to take a look at SMUSD.US/transparency.
Dr. Choi, where is that listed though on the homepage? Because I could put in the transparency, but if you wanted to try to just navigate to that, what's it under?
So right now, it is that link. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide a link on the business services homepage.
Business services?
Yeah. So we will provide that link on our business services homepage, but I wanted to introduce that and share it with you first.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board about the budget at all? If you want to go back to anything?
So how it did perform in the past 3 years, like versus deficit or surplus in the past 3 years? Can you share me how?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We get that question a lot. It's like, has the district been deficit spending? Because you see it in the news today, right? You see a lot of districts really getting into financial trouble when they deficit spend. And when they deficit spend for multiple years, it becomes a structural deficit, right? And when you look at our financials and you look at our budgets, you have to look at the audited actuals, right? Because it is the most accurate snapshot of our budget. And when you look at the last 3 years, we have not deficit spent, right? Our district has surplus spent. That means we have more revenues than our expenditures in the last 3 years, year over year. And that explains why we have such a healthy reserve, right? And the board is very wise in the sense that it's committing balances to very important priorities to protect that reserve. We're not just spending down those reserves, right? These are priorities that reflect our values as a district. So I'm very proud of our budget. I'm very proud of our financial status and where we are. In the last 3 years, when you take a look at our audited financials, it's not only been positive, and we hear it from our auditors every year that we have very, very strong, healthy finances. We have not been deficit spending.
Yeah, I believe that we are the one of very few district around here that we have actual surplus in the past 3 years because
That's right. And I do want to point out,
Yeah.
it's not always a bad thing to
Yeah.
deficit spend. Sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because when you deficit spend, and sometimes it could be an investment in something, right? The district is spending a certain amount of dollars that may span multiple years, and it may be worth the effort or to deficit spend because you're making an investment, right? But when you look at our end of the year audited actuals, we have not deficit spent.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Anything else? Mr. Chang, anything?
Well, I have a question since the school foundation are still here. I see the yard sign. Some of the student parents look like they have their own perception, so they're not. Maybe it's not big, but big group. But I think before I think they always school foundation and then PTA donation. So I don't know is that there's a trend right now. Some they just commit for PTA and not the school foundation. If you look at the street, you see I see that they have a kid, but they are not have a sign. But I saw them go to the school activity. They have to buy the ticket. So I think we need to pay attention on this issue.
Yeah, that is an interesting observation. And, I think it's an ongoing discussion that we have with the San Marino Schools Foundation. That is something that we are observing very closely because as we look at, where the funds are coming and where they're going, that is something that I believe it's a partnership. In our district, we rely so much on our local organizations, and it's not just Schools Foundation or PTA, right? There's a number of community-based organizations that it is an ongoing collaboration, and that's something that we will continue to have conversations and that dialogue to ensure that our schools are taking advantage and really valuing that local revenue. It's important for our district. Without that local revenue, it would be a disaster for us. So we rely very heavily on these local revenues.
You know what? Because of the school foundation donate amount, I think is essential. So mean they commit each year certain amount. I think the entire community, including the PIO here, I definitely, this is a public school. We cannot push people, right? Fully write a check, but I think this community it's been 40 years, go through the school foundation effort, help the school district. I think that we need to continuously deliver this message to the public, to the new comer, Yeah, because they may think, okay, they write a check, directly give to the PTA and PTA give to spend in the classroom. So then the teacher, they are happy. No, I think we need to help the school foundation build up, you know, the besides the state revenue, then the second school foundation, everyone need to participate.
I agree with you. The San Marino Schools Foundation.
So I think we entire the community need to have this kind of census. They should not say that, okay, because I praise the teacher. Today I tell you I intentionally to speak up this because the last night I come back, then I drive through, so I know each probably not 100%. I know which house they have a kid, but they don't have a sign. They don't have a sign. But instead of some of the senior citizens, they still commit. They commit even $100 get the sign because this show the support, the difference. This community with the neighborhood community, the difference because of the school foundation. This is a good tradition. Yeah, you can see that right now. South Park, they also start to have the sign. We don't want to see one day we don't see the sign in this community.
I agree. I think it's an educational
So
piece.
I mean the administration need to help. This administration work with the board, see how we can support the school foundation, to continue to send a message. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe it's a partnership.
I don't know if that is we violate the law. If we don't see the sign in front the house, I think this is not cooperate the family to try to help the school district make an effort for quality education. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that I appreciate the foundation for all the work they're doing. And I think that this next year ahead, they're working on some exciting things, some strategic shifts maybe that are very positive.
Yeah, I know. I know.
No, they're doing, he's talking about.
Is working very hard, but
yeah.
But we have to help.
Well, I think maybe people will see these new programs and get excited about them, and hopefully that'll spark some more interest.
Yeah, that's good. If we get a one, then.
We want market, we want to hit the grandparents, we want schools to they have a long legacy, their children and children, and also continue too. So annual fund for us is annual knowledge and invest, right? Any household would pay for their retirement. So we want people to get excited about an endowment because, like, I'm going to steal your word, like the government isn't going to come invest with us. I think very reluctant the more endowment and invest, the more we can just know if they're in it for give us less, we have our endowment to our best view of our retirement plan. So, any possible building on your home or up, adding to it, so that's the, this how that measure and mode won't cover it all. Please give 31 building or please fund this classroom. So those are like our key tiers. Continue to ask the parents to invest because they should. It's their school. We should still give them some access so that they're bought and really are. And they will eventually, some of them able to give a higher level to major dollar. And then investment.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you so much, Foundation. Stephen, can you go back on the last slide in terms of that? No, where you were recommending some ideas
Of
about
the funds,
the funds
committed funds.
at the very end.
There.
There. Okay, so, would like to really make a suggestion on this in terms of committing funds to innovation and academic, achievement, if you will. I see a lot of that has to do with the business side as well as the, operational side. Would like some funds or consideration. I want to talk to my board about this, about how we grow those, like if this is the San Marino brand, if this is in fact the destination, school district, then we need to continue to invest in the programs that we have or look at new opportunities for our students. And so one of the things I'm going to talk to my board members about is that academic piece in terms of committing funds for the achievement, and not just high performing students, but all students, right? What are we reinvesting when we have that? I'm not saying this isn't a great start. I'm just saying part of what I don't see, what I'm really passionate about, is the academic innovation that we have here in San Marino. And it is part of who we are. No one's coming here if not for the academics and not necessarily the rigor, but the opportunities that we provide. Okay.
Appreciate that input. Thank you.
Not a question, just a, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we need to adjourn. We have to get into closed session, for the board. So thank you.
Yeah.